16-year-old Maya Chen sat at her piano, her fingers moving across the keys with a confidence that seemed almost impossible. She couldn't see the black and white keys beneath her hands. She couldn't see the sheet music that most pianists relied on. She couldn't even see the walls of her small bedroom where she practiced every single day. But none of that mattered when she played. The music flowing from her fingertips told a story that needed no eyes to understand. Maya hadn't always been blind. Until she was 7 years old, she could see everything just like anyone else. She remembered colors, faces, and the way sunlight looked streaming through windows. But then, a degenerative condition slowly took her vision away, bit by bit, until the world went completely dark. The doctors had explained it to her parents in complicated medical terms, but for young Maya, it simply meant that the lights were going out and would never come back on. Most people thought losing her sight would limit what she could do in life. They spoke in hushed, pitiful voices around her, as if blindness meant she was broken somehow. But Maya's mother had taught her something important during those difficult early years. She'd said that losing one sense often meant the others grew stronger, and for Maya that couldn't have been more true. Her hearing became incredibly sharp. She could identify people by their footsteps, tell what room she was in by the echo of sounds, and most importantly, she could hear music in a way she never had before. The piano became her escape, her voice, and her greatest passion. Where other students struggled to memorize pieces, Maya absorbed them naturally. She would listen to recordings over and over, her mind photographing every note, every pause, every subtle change in tempo. Her fingers learned the geography of the keyboard so well that she could play complex passages without a single wrong note. What took other students months to learn, Maya could master in weeks. Her piano teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, was the first person outside her family to truly believe in her potential. Mrs. Rodriguez was a kind woman in her 50s who had taught piano for over 30 years. She'd seen countless students come and go, but she told Maya's parents that their daughter had something special, something rare that couldn't be taught. It was feeling, pure emotion that poured through the music and touched anyone who listened. "She doesn't just play the notes," Mrs. Rodriguez would say. "She understands what the composer was feeling when they wrote it. That's a gift." For 3 years, Maya worked with Mrs. Rodriguez, growing stronger and more skilled with each lesson. Then, one afternoon in late spring, Mrs. Rodriguez arrived at Maya's house with news that made the girl's heart race with excitement. A famous pianist named Victor Petrova was coming to their city for an international music festival. He was one of the most celebrated pianists in the world, known for his powerful performances and technical brilliance, and he was holding auditions for a masterclass that would be attended by music students from across the country. "This is your chance, Maya," Mrs. Rodriguez said, barely able to contain her own excitement. "If Victor accepts you into his masterclass, it could open doors you've only dreamed about. Scholarships, opportunities, connections to the best music schools in the world." Maya's father, who had been listening from the doorway, expressed the concern that Maya herself was too excited to think about. "But will he accept a blind student? Won't that be a problem?" Mrs. Rodriguez paused, and Maya could hear the slight hesitation in her voice. "He'll have to hear her play first. Once he does, he'll understand." No one could listen to Maya and turn her away. From that moment, Maya had a new purpose. The audition was 3 months away, and she needed to prepare something spectacular. Mrs. Rodriguez suggested Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, one of the most beautiful and technically challenging pieces in the classical repertoire. It was ambitious, perhaps too ambitious for a 16-year-old, but Mrs. Rodriguez knew Maya could handle it. Maya threw herself into the preparation with an intensity that worried her parents. She practiced 8 hours a day, sometimes more. Her fingers would ache, her back would hurt from sitting so long, but she refused to stop. Every morning she woke up thinking about the audition. Every night she fell asleep with the music playing in her mind. The Rachmaninoff became part of her, every note memorized, every emotion understood and internalized. Her father would sit in the hallway outside her room, listening to her play the same sections over and over, perfecting tiny details that most people would never even notice. Sometimes he'd hear her cry out in frustration when she made a mistake. then immediately start the section again. He worried about the pressure she was putting on herself, but he also understood why this mattered so much to her. This wasn't just about music. This was about proving that she belonged in a world that often tried to exclude people like her. As the weeks passed, something magical happened. The piece that had started out as a technical challenge became something more. Maya wasn't just playing the notes anymore. She was living inside the music, feeling every rise and fall, every moment of joy and sorrow that Rachmaninoff had poured into his composition. Mrs. Rodriguez would sometimes stop her during lessons, not to correct mistakes, but simply because she was moved to tears by what she was hearing. "That's it," she'd whisper. "That's exactly it. Victor Petrova will hear this and he'll know immediately that you're something special." Finally, the day of the audition arrived. Maya barely slept the night before. She kept going over the piece, in her mind her fingers twitching slightly as if playing an invisible piano. Her father helped her choose a simple but elegant dress to wear, describing it to her in detail so she could picture how she looked. "Dark blue," he said, with a modest neckline and long sleeves. "Professional and sophisticated." The drive to the concert hall felt like it took forever. Maya sat in the back seat, her hands folded in her lap, trying to calm her breathing. Her father kept up a steady stream of encouraging words, but she could hear the nervousness in his voice too. They both knew how much was riding on this audition. When they arrived at the concert hall, Maya could feel the grandeur of the space even before they entered. The building was old and important, the kind of place where legendary musicians had performed for over a century. Her father guided her through the entrance, and she heard the echo of their footsteps on marble floors. Other students were waiting with their parents, and Maya could hear the nervous energy in their whispered conversations. A woman with a clipboard called out names, and Maya listened as other auditionees were led away to perform. Some came back looking happy, others looked crushed. The wait felt endless. Maya's hands were starting to sweat, and she wiped them on her dress, hoping she wouldn't be too nervous to play when her turn finally came. Then she heard her name. Maya Chen. Her father took her arm and guided her toward the audition room. This was it. This was the moment she'd been preparing for, dreaming about, working toward for 3 long months. Her entire future felt like it balanced on what would happen in the next few minutes. They walked down a long corridor, and Maya could hear the faint sound of a piano coming from behind closed doors. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought everyone must be able to hear it. The woman with the clipboard opened a door, and Maya's father began to lead her inside. But before they could take more than a few steps into the room, a sharp voice cut through the air. It was a man's voice, speaking with a heavy accent, dripping with authority and impatience. "Stop. What is this?" Maya froze. Something in that tone made her stomach drop. "She's here for the audition," her father said calmly. "This is Maya Chen. She's prepared Rachmaninoff's. She's blind." It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. "Yes, but if you would just listen to her play." "No." The word was final, absolute. Serious piano performance requires visual connection with the instrument and with the audience. This is not possible for someone in her condition. "I'm sorry, but this audition is a waste of everyone's time." Maya felt like the floor had disappeared beneath her feet. She reached out, grabbing her father's arm to steady herself. "Please." "Her," father said, and Maya could hear the desperation creeping into his voice. "Just give her 5 minutes, let her show you what she can do." The answer is no. There are 50 other students waiting, students who can actually pursue this professionally. Please don't make this more difficult than it needs to be. Maya's father tried to argue, but the man, Victor Petrova, the pianist she'd admired and worked so hard to impress, had already dismissed them. She heard him turn away, heard papers rustling as he prepared for the next audition. Her father's hand on her shoulder was gentle but firm as he guided her back toward the door. Maya walked like she was in a dream, or rather, a nightmare. She hadn't played a single note. He hadn't heard even a measure of the piece she'd spent 3 months perfecting. He'd judged her entirely on the fact that she couldn't see. They walked back down that long corridor in complete silence. Maya concentrated on putting one foot in front of the other, on not breaking down in this public space surrounded by other students and their parents. But as soon as they stepped outside into the afternoon air, the tears came. They poured down her face as her father pulled her into a tight hug, his own voice breaking as he tried to comfort her. "It's his loss," he whispered. "He doesn't know what he's missing. You're brilliant, Maya. You're so talented and brilliant." But his words couldn't reach through the crushing disappointment that enveloped her. All those hours of practice, all those dreams she'd allowed herself to have, all the hope she'd carried into that building, it had all been for nothing. She hadn't been rejected because she wasn't good enough. She'd been rejected before anyone even knew if she was good enough or not, and that somehow hurt even more. For 3 days after the audition, Maya didn't touch her piano. She couldn't bring herself to go near it. Every time she walked past her bedroom, she could hear it sitting there in the silence waiting for her. But the thought of playing made her chest feel tight and heavy. The instrument that had once been her greatest joy now reminded her only of rejection and humiliation. Her father tried to coax her out of her room with her favorite meals. Mrs. Rodriguez called every day, her voice full of concern and anger at what had happened. Even Maya's younger brother, who usually teased her mercilessly, left her alone and spoke in hushed tones around the house. Everyone was worried, but Maya just wanted to be left alone with her disappointment. On the 4th day, her best friend Lily showed up at the house unannounced. Lily had been Maya's friend since elementary school, back before Maya had lost her sight. While other kids had drifted away when Maya became blind, uncomfortable with her disability or simply not knowing how to act around her anymore, Lily had stayed. She'd learned to describe things visually for Maya without being asked, guided her through crowded hallways at school without making a big deal of it, and most importantly, never treated her like she was fragile or broken. "Okay, enough," Lily announced as she burst into Maya's room. "I'm staging an intervention." Maya was lying on her bed, staring at nothing. "I don't want to talk about it." "Good, because I don't want to talk either. I want you to play." "No." "Yes." Lily's voice was firm but gentle. "Look, that Victor guy is a complete jerk. We all know it. But you didn't spend 3 months preparing that piece for him. You did it for you. And I'll be honest, I'm being completely selfish here because I never actually got to hear you play it all the way through. You were always too busy practicing to perform it for anyone." Maya rolled over, turning her back to where Lily's voice was coming from. "What's the point? I'm not going to get into any prestigious school now. Everyone will know that Victor Petrova rejected me. Why would anyone else take a chance on a blind pianist if someone like him won't?" Lily was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice had changed. It wasn't cheerful anymore. It was serious, almost angry. "You know what really makes me mad? That you're letting him win. He said you couldn't do this, and now you're proving him right by giving up. The Maya I know doesn't quit. The Maya I know plays piano because she loves it, not because some famous guy says she's allowed to." The words hit harder than Maya expected. She sat up slowly, her hands gripping the edge of her bed. "I'm not giving up. I need time." "Time to do what? Feel sorry for yourself? You can do that while playing piano. Come on, play for me. Not for Victor, not for any audition or school. Just for me, your best friend who has listened to you practice scales for the last 3 years and deserves to hear something beautiful." Despite everything, Maya felt a small smile tugging at her lips. Lily had a way of cutting through her defenses. "You're really not going to leave me alone, are you?" "Absolutely not. I cleared my entire afternoon for this." Maya took a deep breath. Her fingers tingled slightly, the way they always did when she hadn't played for a while. Maybe Lily was right. Maybe she needed to remember why she fell in love with music in the first place. It wasn't about auditions or famous teachers. It was about the feeling she got when her fingers touched the keys, when the music flowed through her and became something real and alive. She stood up and let Lily guide her to the piano bench. Sitting down felt both familiar and strange after the days away. She placed her hands on the keys, feeling their smooth surface, remembering their geography like greeting old friends. "What do you want to hear?" Maya asked. "The Rachmaninoff, the whole thing. And I'm going to record it on my phone if that's okay. I want to be able to listen to it again." Maya's chest tightened at the mention of recording, but she nodded. "Okay, but this is just for you. Don't show it to anyone. I promise," Lily said. "This is just for us." Maya closed her eyes, even though it made no difference to what she could see. She took 3 deep breaths the way Mrs. Rodriguez had taught her, and then she began to play. The first notes came out tentative, uncertain. But as she continued, something shifted inside her. The hurt she'd been carrying, the anger at being judged without being heard, the frustration of working so hard only to be dismissed, all of it poured into the music. Her fingers moved faster, more confidently. She wasn't playing for an audition anymore. She was playing because she needed to, because the music had to come out or it would consume her from the inside. The piece built and swelled, moving through moments of gentle beauty into passages of stunning complexity. Her hands flew across the keyboard, executing jumps and runs that she'd practiced thousands of times until they became instinct. When she reached the final movement, tears were streaming down her face, but she didn't stop. She played through them, letting everything she felt become sound. When the last note faded into silence, Maya sat perfectly still, her hand still resting on the keys. She felt emptied out, but in a good way, like she'd released something poisonous that had been building inside her. "That was incredible," Lily whispered. Her voice sounded strange, thick with emotion. "Maya, that was absolutely incredible. I don't have the words. I knew you were good, but that was something else entirely." Maya wiped her eyes and managed a small laugh. "Thanks. I needed that more than I realized." What Maya didn't know was that Lily was staring at her phone with a thoughtful expression. She'd kept her promise, the recording was just for them. But as she watched it back, seeing Maya's fingers dance across the keys, seeing the raw emotion on her friend's face, she felt a growing sense of anger on Maya's behalf. This was what Victor Petrova had refused to hear. This was what he'd dismissed as impossible, as a waste of time. That evening, after Lily had gone home, she sat in her bedroom watching the video again and again. She thought about Maya's face when she'd come home from that audition, the devastation in her voice. She thought about how unfair it was that someone could be judged so harshly for something they couldn't control, and she made a decision. She opened her social media account and looked at the video one more time. Then she started typing a caption. "This is my best friend Maya. She's 16 years old and she's blind. 3 days ago she was rejected from a masterclass audition by famous pianist Victor Petrova. He wouldn't even let her play a single note. He said a blind person couldn't be a serious pianist." This is what he refused to hear. Her finger hovered over the post button. She'd promised Maya this was just for them. But she also knew that sometimes keeping a promise meant letting an injustice continue. She thought about texting Maya to ask permission, but it was late, and she knew Maya would probably say no. She'd been so hurt, so defeated. She probably wouldn't want anyone else to see her vulnerability. But the world needed to see this. People needed to know what Victor Petrova had done. And more importantly, people needed to hear Maya play. Lily hit post. For the first few hours, nothing much happened. A few of Lily's friends liked it and left supportive comments. Someone shared it to their story. It was nice, but small. Lily went to bed feeling like maybe she'd made a mistake, broken Maya's trust for nothing. But social media works in mysterious ways. While Lily slept, the video was being shared and reshared. Someone with a lot of followers saw it and posted it to their account. Then someone else did the same. By morning, the video had been viewed over 50,000 times. By noon, it had reached 500,000. By evening, it had crossed 2 million views and was still climbing. Comments poured in from around the world. Classical musicians, music teachers, disability advocates, and thousands of regular people who were moved by Maya's playing and outraged by her treatment. People tagged Victor Petrova in the comments, demanding an explanation. Others tagged the music festival, asking how they could support such discrimination. The story was picked up by local news outlets, then regional ones, then national ones. Lily watched in amazement as the numbers kept climbing. Her phone wouldn't stop buzzing with notifications. She tried to call Maya several times that day, but kept losing her nerve and hanging up before it could ring through. How was she going to explain what she'd done? She'd betrayed Maya's trust, even if it was for a good reason. Finally, late in the afternoon, Maya's father called her. His voice was strange, caught between confusion and something else. "Lily, what did you do?" Her stomach dropped. "Is Maya angry?" "She doesn't know yet. She's been with Mrs. Rodriguez all day and we haven't told her. But Lily, there are news vans outside our house. Someone from the national morning show called asking for an interview. Maya's video is everywhere." "What happened?" Lily explained everything, her words tumbling over each other. She apologized repeatedly, saying she knew she'd broken her promise but she couldn't stand the injustice of it all. She waited for Maya's father to be angry with her, but instead he was quiet for a long moment. "I need to talk to Maya," he finally said. "This is going to be overwhelming for her." "But Lily—" "Thank you. What Victor did was wrong, and maybe now people will understand that. Maybe something good can come from this after all." When Maya found out what had happened, she went through every emotion possible. First came shock, then anger at Lily for posting the video without permission, then embarrassment that millions of people had seen her crying while she played, then fear about what this attention would mean. But underneath all of that, something else was growing, a small spark of hope, because for the first time since that horrible audition, people were hearing her play. Not judging her by her blindness, but by her music. And they were listening, really listening. The video kept spreading through the night. Music forums debated Victor Petrova's actions. Famous pianists began sharing the video with messages of support for Maya. Disability rights organizations used it as an example of the discrimination that talented individuals still faced. Everyone had an opinion. And somewhere in the city, Victor Petrova was being told by his publicist that they had a very serious problem. The video of the blind girl he'd rejected had gone viral, and the internet was not being kind to him. Not kind at all. The performance that was supposed to remain private, shared between two best friends in a small bedroom, had become something much bigger. It had become a movement, a conversation, a moment that would change everything. Maya Chen had wanted Victor Petrova to hear her play. Now the entire world was listening instead. James Morrison had been running the International Music Festival for 15 years, and he'd never experienced anything like this. He sat in his office at 7 in the morning, his third cup of coffee already going cold on his desk, staring at his computer screen in disbelief. His email inbox had over 3,000 unread messages. His phone had been ringing nonstop since he'd arrived an hour earlier. And outside the festival office building, a group of about 30 protesters had gathered, holding signs and chanting. His assistant, a young woman named Grace, knocked on his doorframe. She looked exhausted, and the festival's opening night wasn't for another week. The mayor's office just called again. They want to know what we're going to do about the situation. The situation, James repeated, rubbing his temples. Is that what we're calling it now? The Victor Petrova discrimination controversy doesn't exactly roll off the tongue. James almost smiled, but he was too tired. He pulled up the video on his screen for what must have been the 20th time that morning. He watched the blind girl, Maya Chen, he'd learned her name, play with such skill and emotion that it made his chest ache. Then he looked at the view count. Over 8 million now. 8 million people had watched this video, and a significant portion of them were very, very angry with his festival. "What are the sponsors saying?" he asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. Grace winced. "Henderson Financial pulled out this morning. That's $50,000 gone. Westfield Corp called and said they're reevaluating their partnership. And 3 others have sent emails asking for meetings to discuss their concerns." James felt his stomach drop. The festival operated on a tight budget as it was. Losing sponsors could mean cutting programs, reducing the scholarship fund, maybe even threatening the festival's future. What about ticket sales? Down 30% from last year. People are posting on social media saying they won't support a festival that discriminates against disabled musicians. "But we didn't discriminate," James said, hearing the defensiveness in his own voice. "Victor made that decision on his own. We didn't even know about it until the video went viral." "Try explaining that to the internet," Grace said. "In their eyes, we hired Victor, so we're responsible for his actions." James knew she was right. It didn't matter that he personally disagreed with what Victor had done. It didn't matter that if he'd been in that audition room, he would have insisted the girl be allowed to play. What mattered was that Victor Petrova was the face of their festival this year, and his actions were now their problem. His phone rang again. He glanced at the caller ID and groaned. "It's the board president." "Good luck," Grace said, slipping out of the office and closing the door behind her. The conversation with the board president was exactly as unpleasant as James had expected. There was talk of canceling Victor's performances entirely, of issuing public apologies, of completely restructuring the festival's audition policies. By the time James hung up, he felt like he'd aged 10 years in 30 minutes. But the worst was yet to come. That afternoon, Victor Petrova himself arrived at the festival office, flanked by his manager and publicist. Victor looked different than James remembered from their previous meetings. The confident, almost arrogant bearing was gone. He looked tired and defensive, his shoulders slightly hunched as if he was expecting to be attacked. "We need to do damage control," Victor's publicist said before even sitting down. She was a sharp-looking woman in an expensive suit, and she got straight to business. "Victor needs to give a statement, something that explains his position without admitting fault." James stared at her. "Explains his position?" "He rejected a talented student without hearing her play because she's blind." "What's there to explain?" Victor spoke for the first time, his accented voice carrying an edge of irritation. "You don't understand the complexities of professional piano performance. The visual connection with the instrument is crucial. The ability to make eye contact with an audience, to judge their reactions, these things matter. I was trying to save that girl from pursuing a career that would be full of limitations and disappointments." "Did you watch the video?" James asked. "Did you see her play?" "Of course I watched it. It's been sent to me about 500 times. Victor waved his hand dismissively. "She has some talent, yes. But a performance in someone's living room is not the same as performing on a professional stage. The pressure, the acoustics, the presence of an audience." "She has more than some talent," James interrupted. "She's extraordinary. And you know what? If you can't see that, then maybe you're the one with the vision problem." The room went silent. Victor's manager cleared his throat uncomfortably. His publicist's eyes went wide. Victor stood up, his face flushing red. "I don't have to sit here and be insulted. I am one of the most respected pianists in the world. I have performed in every major concert hall, won every major competition. And none of that matters if you can't recognize genuine talent when it's right in front of you," James said. He was surprised by his own boldness, but also strangely liberated. "Look, Victor, I'm not trying to attack you. But this situation is hurting everyone. The festival is losing sponsors and ticket sales. Your reputation is being damaged. And somewhere out there, a talented young woman is probably devastated all over again because this whole thing has been dragged back into the spotlight." Victor sat back down slowly. For the first time, he looked uncertain. "What do you want me to do?" "I want you to make this right," James said. "I don't know how yet, but we need to figure something out." The meeting ended without any clear resolution. Victor left looking troubled, his publicist typing furiously on her phone as they walked out. James sat alone in his office, feeling the weight of the entire situation pressing down on him. The next morning brought a new crisis that somehow made everything worse. The young pianist who was supposed to perform as the opening act for Victor's headline concert called from the hospital. He had pneumonia and would be out for at least 3 weeks. The concert was in 5 days. Grace stood in James's doorway looking genuinely panicked. "What are we going to do?" "We can't cancel the opening night. We've already lost so much money. If we cancel now, the festival might not survive." James put his head in his hands. They'd spent months planning this concert. It was sold out, or at least it had been before the controversy started. Finding a replacement pianist of sufficient caliber with only 5 days' notice was essentially impossible. Every professional pianist he could think of was either already booked or wouldn't be able to prepare a full program in time. "We could ask one of the masterclass students to step up," Grace suggested hesitantly. "Maybe one of the more advanced ones. The masterclass hasn't even started yet. The students aren't expecting to perform publicly. That's not fair to them." Grace was quiet for a moment. Then she said very carefully, "What about Maya Chen?" James looked up sharply. "What? Think about it. She's already prepared a piece. She's been practicing for months, and her video has 8 million views. People know who she is now. If we invited her to perform, it might actually help the festival. It would show that we support talented musicians regardless of disability. It would be like making things right. Or it could look like we're exploiting her for publicity," James countered. "Using her to save our reputation?" "Maybe," Grace admitted. "But what if she wants to perform? What if this is actually her dream? We'd be giving her the opportunity that Victor took away." James thought about it. The idea was risky, maybe even reckless. If Maya performed and something went wrong, it would make everything worse. But if she performed and succeeded, it could be exactly what the festival needed. More importantly, it could be what Maya needed. "Victor would never agree to it," James said. "Victor doesn't get a vote," Grace replied firmly. "You're the festival director. This is your decision." James pulled up Maya's video on his computer one more time. He watched her play, saw the emotion on her face, the absolute mastery in her technique. This wasn't just some girl who could play piano adequately. This was a genuine artist who'd been rejected for all the wrong reasons. He picked up his phone and looked at Grace. "Do we have contact information for her family?" Grace smiled and pulled out her tablet. "I may have already looked that up. Just in case, You're very presumptuous, you know that? That's why you hired me." James dialed the number, his heart pounding. He had no idea if Maya's family would even answer a call from the festival, given what had happened. And even if they did, he had no idea if Maya would be willing to perform. She'd been rejected and humiliated. Why would she want anything to do with them? The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. James was about to hang up when someone answered. "Hello?" It was a man's voice, cautious and guarded. "Hello, this is James Morrison. I'm the director of the International Music Festival. Is this Maya Chen's father?" There was a long pause. "What do you want?" James took a deep breath. "I want to offer your daughter an opportunity. Our opening act for the headline concert has fallen ill. I'd like to invite Maya to perform in his place, not as a publicity stunt and not as an apology, but because she deserves it, because she's talented enough to be on that stage." Another pause, even longer this time. James could hear muffled voices in the background as if Maya's father had covered the phone to talk to someone else. Finally, the voice came back. "Let me talk to my daughter. I'll call you back." The line went dead. James looked at Grace. Well, at least he didn't hang up on me immediately. That's a good sign, right? I honestly have no idea. They waited. An hour passed, then 2. James tried to work on other festival business, but he couldn't concentrate. Everything hinged on this decision. If Maya said yes, it could save the festival. If she said no, he couldn't blame her, but he didn't know what else he could do. Finally, his phone rang. Maya's father's number. James answered on the first ring. "Hello?" "She wants to talk to you herself," Maya's father said. There was a rustling sound, and then a different voice came on the line. It was younger, uncertain, but there was strength underneath the nervousness. "This is Maya," she said. "Is this really happening? Are you really asking me to perform?" James felt something loosen in his chest. "Yes, Maya, I really am. I know you have every reason to say no after what happened. But I've seen your video. The whole world has seen your video. And I think you deserve to play on that stage. Not for us, not for the festival, but for yourself." Maya was quiet for so long that James thought the call had dropped. Then she said, "When is the concert?" 5 days from now. That's not much time. I know. And if it's too much pressure, I completely understand." Another pause. Then so quietly James almost missed it, Maya said, "I'll do it." The 5 days between the phone call and the concert passed in a blur of preparation and panic. Maya practiced until her fingers ached, then practiced some more. But this time was different from before. This time Mrs. Rodriguez sat with her for hours each day, helping her refine every detail. This time her father drove her to the concert hall twice so she could get familiar with the stage, feel the acoustic differences, understand the space where she'd be performing. And this time the whole world seemed to be watching. News crews requested interviews. Her social media accounts, which she barely knew how to use, exploded with messages of support. People sent flowers to her house. A local restaurant even offered to cater a celebration dinner after the concert. It was overwhelming in a way Maya had never experienced, and sometimes she had to lock herself in her room just to breathe. The night before the concert, she couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, running through the piece in her mind, her fingers twitching against the blanket as if playing an invisible piano. But she'd made a decision that she hadn't told anyone about yet. She wasn't going to play the Rachmaninoff. That piece belonged to the audition, to the rejection, to a version of herself that had been broken down and had to build herself back up. Tomorrow she was going to play something new. She'd spent the last 3 nights composing, working out melodies and harmonies in her head before testing them on the piano. The piece was called Darkness into Light, and it told her story. It started with haunting, melancholic notes that captured the confusion and fear of losing her sight. Then it moved through anger and frustration, using sharp, dissonant chords that felt like arguing with the universe. But gradually, it transformed into something hopeful, something beautiful, as if she was discovering that darkness didn't mean emptiness. It meant finding new ways to see. When she told Mrs. Rodriguez about her decision the next morning, her teacher was quiet for a long moment. "Are you sure?" The Rachmaninoff is what you've been preparing. This new piece, you've only been working on it for a few days. I know, Maya said. But the Rachmaninoff isn't mine. It's beautiful and I love it, but it's someone else's story. Tonight I want to tell my own. Mrs. Rodriguez squeezed her hand. Then that's what you'll do. And it will be perfect. The concert hall filled up early. Ticket sales had surged once Maya's performance was announced. People who'd never attended the festival before bought seats just to see the blind girl who'd been rejected and was now getting her chance. The local news stations set up cameras. The controversy had transformed into something else: anticipation, curiosity, and hope. Backstage, Maya sat in a small dressing room with her father. She could hear the muffled sounds of the audience finding their seats, the rustle of programs, the low hum of hundreds of conversations. Her hands were cold despite the warmth of the room, and her heart was beating so hard she could feel it in her throat. "You don't have to do this," her father said gently. "If it's too much, no one would blame you for walking away." Maya shook her head. "I'm not walking away. I'm terrified, but I'm not walking away. That's my girl." She could hear the pride in his voice, and it steadied her. There was a knock on the door, and Grace, the festival assistant, poked her head in. "5 minutes, Maya. How are you feeling?" "Like I might throw up," Maya admitted. "That's completely normal. Every performer feels that way. But I watched you rehearse yesterday and you're going to be amazing." Grace paused, then added, "There's someone who wants to speak with you before you go on. You don't have to if you don't want to." "Who?" Maya asked, though something in her gut already knew the answer. "Victor Petrova." The room went silent. Maya felt her father tense beside her. She could sense his protective instincts kicking in, ready to tell Victor to leave to protect his daughter from any more hurt. But Maya surprised herself by saying, "It's okay. Let him in." She heard her father start to protest, but she touched his arm. "I need to do this." Heavy footsteps entered the room, and then that familiar accented voice spoke. But it sounded different than it had during the audition. Smaller somehow, less certain. "Thank you for seeing me." Maya didn't say anything. She waited. "I watched your video," Victor continued, "many times. And I was wrong. I was wrong about you, wrong about what you could do, wrong about everything I said at that audition." He paused, and Maya could hear him struggling with the words. "I have been playing piano for 45 years. I have won every major competition, performed in every important venue. And somewhere along the way I forgot what music is really about. I started believing it was about technique, about precision, about following rules. But you reminded me that it's about feeling, about truth, about courage." Maya's throat felt tight. She hadn't expected this. She'd expected excuses, maybe a half-hearted apology forced by his publicist. Not this raw honesty. "I judged you without hearing you play," Victor said, his voice rough with emotion. "That was not only unprofessional, it was cruel. And I am deeply sorry. I cannot undo what I did. But I want you to know that when you play tonight, I will be in the audience. Not as a critic, not as a judge, but as someone who hopes to learn something from you." Maya felt tears pricking her eyes. "Why are you telling me this now? Right before I have to go on stage?" "Because I wanted you to know that you don't have to prove anything to me or to anyone else tonight. You already have. The moment you agreed to perform after what I did to you, you proved you have more courage than I ever had." There was a long silence. Then Maya said quietly, "I'm not playing the Rachmaninoff tonight." She heard Victor's surprise in his sharp intake of breath. No, I'm playing something I wrote, something that's mine." She waited for him to object, to say that an original composition from a 16-year-old wasn't appropriate for such an important concert. But instead he said, "I can't wait to hear it." After Victor left, Grace returned to say it was time. Maya's father walked her to the wings of the stage, and she could feel the energy of the full concert hall. Hundreds of people waiting, watching. Someone announced her name over the speaker system, and the crowd erupted in applause. It was different from what she'd imagined at the audition. This wasn't polite, obligatory clapping. This was genuine, enthusiastic, supportive. Her father guided her to the piano bench and stepped back. Maya sat down, her hands finding the keys like coming home. She took 3 deep breaths, and the concert hall fell into complete silence. Hundreds of people all waiting for her to begin. For just a moment, doubt crashed over her. What if she made a mistake? What if her original piece wasn't good enough? What if everyone was disappointed? But then she thought about the last few weeks. The rejection, the viral video, the outpouring of support from strangers, the conversation with Victor. She thought about every hour she'd spent practicing, every moment of frustration and triumph. She thought about the music inside her that needed to come out. She placed her fingers on the keys and began to play. The opening notes of Darkness into Light floated through the concert hall. Soft and haunting, Maya let herself fall into the music, feeling it flow through her fingers. She played the confusion of losing her sight, the way the world had changed and how she'd had to learn everything again. The audience sat transfixed, barely breathing. Then the music shifted, becoming more aggressive, more frustrated. Her fingers pounded the keys with controlled fury, expressing the anger she'd felt at being judged, at being told she couldn't do something because of her blindness. She could feel every person in that hall with her, experiencing what she'd experienced. Gradually, the anger transformed. The chords softened but became more complex, weaving together in unexpected ways. This was the part where she'd learned that darkness wasn't her enemy. It was just a different way of experiencing the world. The music soared, lifting higher and higher, her hands moving across the entire keyboard in passages that seemed impossible without sight. The piece built to a climax that felt like breaking through to sunlight after a storm. Her whole body moved with the music, swaying and leaning into the notes. In the audience, people were crying. Critics who'd seen hundreds of performances found themselves unable to look away. Victor Petrova sat in the third row, tears streaming down his face. Watching this young girl do what he'd once said was impossible. Maya played the final progression, letting the notes ring out and slowly fade into silence. Her hands lifted from the keys and came to rest in her lap. The concert hall was completely quiet. Then someone started to clap. Then another person. Then another. Within seconds, the entire audience was on their feet, applauding so loudly it sounded like thunder. The ovation went on and on, people refusing to stop, refusing to sit back down. Maya sat at the piano, overwhelmed, tears streaming down her face. She couldn't see them, but she could feel them. Hundreds of people showing her that her music had touched them, that she had given them something real and true and beautiful. In the wings, her father stood with his hand over his mouth, crying openly. Mrs. Rodriguez gripped his arm, shaking with emotion. Grace was recording everything on her phone, knowing that this moment needed to be remembered. The applause continued for nearly 10 minutes. When it finally began to die down, people started calling out, "Encore! Encore!" Maya felt someone approach the piano, James Morrison, the festival director. He leaned down and said quietly, "They want more. Will you play something else?" Maya nodded, wiping her eyes. She knew exactly what to play now. She placed her hands on the keys again and the audience immediately fell silent. This time she played the Rachmaninoff, the piece she'd prepared for the audition that never happened. But it sounded different now. It wasn't about proving herself anymore. It was about sharing something beautiful with people who wanted to hear it. When she finished the second time, the applause somehow grew even louder. Maya stood from the piano bench and her father appeared to guide her off stage. As she walked into the wing, someone was standing there waiting. Victor Petrova. He didn't say anything. He simply took her hand and bowed over it, in the traditional gesture of respect that one pianist gives to another, not as a teacher to a student, not as a famous musician to an amateur, but as one artist to another artist who had just taught him something profound about music, about humility, and about what it really means to see.